Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's edition is going to focus on the Girls Get Equal campaign, specifically looking at online gender-based violence. We are here to understand what this is, as this is something that's been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And tonight our discussion is with Plan International. I'm happy to welcome our guests once again on The Square. We have with us Country Director of Plan International, William Mutero. Great to have you on the show, William.
Thank you, and it's nice to be back here on The Square and looking forward to the program.
Thank you, me too. We also have with us, also from Plan International, Safeguarding Coordinator, Sharon Kichoncho. Sharon, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from you as someone who works with, the girls on the ground, works with communities that deal directly with this issue. My name is Diana PC, host of The Square. As always, I'm joined by The Square's resident panelists, and with us we have Charlie Harbour. Charles, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Same here, Diana. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Unfortunately, Brenna is not with us tonight, but I'm sure from wherever she is, she's watching and will also be giving commentary on the show. Before we kick off, please keep your comments coming using hashtag #TheSquareRW, as you can see on your screens, to just join into the conversation tonight on our social media platforms. As always, before we begin, we have midweek highlights, things that have caught the Square residents' attention. And Charles, I'll start with you. Is there something thus far in the week you'd like to share with our audience?
Of course, I'm conscious that we've started a few minutes late, but there's one particular thing that's impressed me. So last week, Cabinet passed a resolution around medical practitioners, the regulation around them being able to do one other, I think, practice out of where they are domiciled, if I can interpret that in my layman. Now, not that they were not allowed to do that, but not all of them were able to do that. Now, the government of Rwanda spends billions of francs in exporting patients, for lack of a better word, excuse my sensitivity.
Unnecessary exportation of patients.
It is not unnecessary, but we spend a lot of money through the Rwanda Medical Referral Board to get people treated abroad. Yet we have expertise locally. Now, yes, we've addressed one issue, but we are yet to address another issue of the rates that our very highly trained, highly specialized doctors should earn through private practice. But it's a step, whatever we have achieved is a step in the right direction, and I believe our medical practitioners, Rwandan medical practitioners, will get remunerated better so that we reduce capital flight. Exactly, a brain drain, so to speak. I know we've talked about this. I think we've had numerous shows on the medical landscape, the medical field in Rwanda, the doctor-patient ratio. So this is a welcome development. You were heard.
Exactly, we were heard. So it's a welcome development in the right direction, especially for patients, and trying to address the doctor-patient ratio, and of course remunerating these hardworking medical practitioners. So yeah, I totally agree with you. So William, thank you for coming back onto the show. Sharon, great to have you here for the first time, and having this conversation with Plan International is fitting. We're living in a time when more and more we're relying on online technology. Most of the times since the COVID pandemic began, the Square itself was online until just recently, and it's actually now a hybrid of both. But really what's happening across the world is that online gender-based violence is something that has been going on for many of years, and there has been an increase due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as millions of people around the world rely on technology globally. And of course, this also means that some of the malpractices or the malactors in this particular field have more to do when it comes to gender-based violence. So for the sake of our viewers, William and Sharon, if we can kick off the conversation by just understanding the definition of gender-based violence. The Girls Get Equal campaign is addressing this in various ways, and this particular session is to do with freedom online. If you can start off, William, and then we'll go over to Sharon on just understanding what gender-based violence is and how it affects girls, especially since we want to keep it continental across sub-Saharan Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. So COVID came and our lives were changed. Now we have more online presence than any other point in the history of humanity, I think. But one of the things that has consequently happened is that the more we have grown our online platforms, and when I say online platforms, this is social media, instant messaging, discussion boards, blogs. A lot of people are on it, and now we are on it because of the necessity to function effectively. But the online world, or cyberspace, we might choose to call it, is vast. It's big, but it's uncontrolled. There's no sheriff who's controlling what's happening in cyberspace. So as more and more people have used cyberspace to survive, basically to function, we have seen an escalation in terms of online gender-based violence. And what I mean here is there are individuals who intentionally create a hostile environment where they cause emotional distress, mental distress, psychological distress to people with a destructive agenda, to discriminate, to degrade, to harm, and it takes the form of insults, it takes the form of, comments that are unwarranted, threats even. We have seen the rise of cyberspace bullying. People basically bully you and naming you all sorts of names. Body shaming is one of the most critical things. So we have girls and young women coming onto these platforms for survival, for education, and the moment they come in, they are subject to this a wave of discrimination, and people do it and get away with it most of the time. And it's a big concern for us, because what is effectively happening is we are silencing people. Because the moment you go online and you want to express your views, and we like the online world because it is good for interaction, for learning, for research, for people to express themselves. But then what happens is there's a lot of, violence, cyber violence that happens. Abuse and there are all these things that are happening, and it causes harm in the fact that we don't care what you have to say. If you post your picture or you post your opinion, we don't care about the opinion. We start attacking you, body shaming, naming. We push gender stereotypes. We have all these lewd comments, and we start to say a lot of things. And it's pretty, a concern. And we've seen the other wave where, without your consent, someone will take your picture or a recording of your audio in your own private space, they upload it, and we have seen pictures that are now part of common, discussion that are used as WhatsApp stickers or all these things of people that are not even aware. They didn't ask for this, and they are used, and the pictures are used repetitively. No consent was asked. So you then start to see that the moment our girls and young women are stepping onto these platforms, they are just, subject to all these things, and effectively it kills the whole agenda of why they're supposed to be there. So there are upsides, yes, with the whole online platforms, but then there are these downsides, and this is what we're here to focus on, and what we can do, because it's a huge concern.
Absolutely.
For us, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we're definitely going to get into the meat of what Plan International is doing, what social media's company can do, what governments can do, what communities can do. Sharon, I'd like to also hear from you, just weighing in if you have, complementary comments and views on what William just said in terms of understanding really the importance of knowing what online gender-based violence is, protection measures, and how it affects girls, especially as someone who works with these communities or works with these segments of populations. So, over to you, Sharon.
Yes, thank you so much. In addition to what Mr. Mutero said, for young children, for young girls especially, in the teenage age, you find that is the age when they want to be appreciated. So when they go online and start using these online platforms, and then they experience such issues such as body shaming, such as different prejudices, harassment, you find that it affects them in such a negative way that they are not able to they feel disrespected, that is number one, but at the same time, they begin to become shy, and they cannot easily share their opinions anymore. And yet these are the girls we want to speak out, to tell us what exactly is on ground, how they want to be represented. Because in Plan International, we are advocating for freedom, whereby they have the freedom to express what is on their hearts, which is positive. And therefore you find that when gender-based violence, which is a form of harassment that is prejudiced especially to females. When this happens, you find that the girls are no longer able to express themselves as appropriately as they should. And yet these are the girls that we would like for them to represent themselves, to speak out, to have a voice. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you for the definitions, Sharon and William, and also just, understanding what this is. Before I move over to you, Charles, I'd like to also just quickly ask our guests here, the prejudice when it comes to online gender-based violence. It's usually prejudiced to women because the abuse or the violence becomes sexualized, and it is more or less a reflection of already gender stereotypes. But my question to you is, how does it translate online? What is the big difference between online and offline gender-based violence in terms of the specific dynamics? Maybe that's something we take for granted, obviously, because most people will say it's not a big deal, it's online, you can't be affected. William, if you can kick off with that.
So I think online now, I can start with the offline. So offline, if we go out on the street and you say a bad comment or you pass, this remark, it's very localized to where you are. Now, when I talk about the online world, it's vast. So things travel quickly, like in an instant. So you have the ability of one person or a group to actually harm a wide range of people across huge geographic distances. That's number one. Now, the thing about it, and as you've said, what's happening online is a reflection of the existing harmful gender norms in society. So when it goes online, the difference now is these people are faceless because you are covered by cyberspace. You are not there in the present. So people develop the bravado, the courage to do things because they know there's no instant repercussion for doing it. So they get this veil from cyberspace. So you don't know where I am, who I am, and you don't even know me. So I can do this and I can get away with it. And it's quite interesting because in a research that was done, I know this is the US, but I think we can extrapolate some information. 81% of teenagers felt that they can bully someone or discriminate someone online and get away with it. Because do you know the person you're talking to? Do you even know which part of the world they're in? So people, when it's faceless and it's not physical, they actually come into their own in terms of the damage that they can do. So that's the thing about the online, that it magnifies things that normally in the real life people would not be able to do. So people get courage to say things that they know that in a society maybe those things are not acceptable, but they go online. And now because there's identity theft, quite a lot of it, so people impersonate other people online and they say all these things and there is no limit to it. And now because cyberspace is owned by no one, there is no authority there who can then clamp down on these issues. So people feel that I'm in a protected space, I can be anonymous, I can go there with a different name, I cannot even identify myself, I just come up with a tagline and start attacking people all over the place. So that whole complexion then brings this, opportunity for people to actually do more damage. And I think this is now the difference within the offline and online.
Gender-based violence. Sharon, do you also want to weigh in on that? Some of the specific differences between online and offline GBV?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to emphasize what Mr. Mutero has said. Indeed, it is very easy for the perpetrators on the online to be able to do what they are doing without the fear of having to face any consequences. So that is a very big problem because it is very hard to actually pinpoint because the person is hiding behind a screen. That means it is very easy for him or her to do something that in real life they would not naturally do. They would not be able to body shame like Sharon when we are face to face, but online they are behind their screen, they are hidden. Therefore they feel safe to be able to do whatever they want, and then there is no consequence. They feel that they'll not be able to face any consequences. So I believe that is the epitome of what we are saying right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Charles, do you want to weigh in on this conversation?
First of all, I must confess that before this show began, I didn't know what we were going to talk about.
Yes. Charles, you can't confess that on national television.
No. As in the extent of the damage.
Of the damage, yeah.
So either Sharon William.
Are good teachers.
Very good at pitching, or maybe they're up for a pay rise in January in a few weeks' time. But I was really struggling to understand what's all this online. So in the run-up to the show, I thought about a few things, and one of the things that came into my mind was mobile money, and the way motors have been told not to take cash. So, and I think I was listening to one of the local FM stations, and ladies were being interviewed, saying these motor guys whom we pay by mobile money actually start hitting on us.
And calling them.
Yes, and calling them. And you know, then I said, okay, fine, maybe that's what we're going to talk about on the square tonight. But William has really opened up my mind to something that I've never thought about. And a few things come into my mind about, as human beings, and this is whether we are male or female, because usually when you talk about gender-based violence, the first stereotype is to think about a woman who is being hit on or aggressed by a man. Now, Sharon is very, very spot on that. And I would sort of paraphrase what she's saying, that cowards who cannot be able to harass you physically will wait for you online, and then in the cover of or masquerading of who they are, they will harass you. Let me not call hitting on you. Now, the same thing will happen to men, and I hope we can talk about this a little bit in depth, because not so many women can harass men physically. Now, COVID has given them an opportunity to harass men. And I know this might come off in a bit of an interesting way, and I like that William and Sharon are putting on a smile on their faces. But I think it's something that especially organizations like Plan International should really look into, because it's very, very easy to put a lot of emphasis on the women, because, again, women and girls and the girl child are naturally going to be more vulnerable. But at the same time, I think we really need to be very careful that we balance this out. Yeah, the whole online presence and online thing, and the way it has exposed everybody. Harassment is something that is going to be it's going to take a huge magnitude, and even post-COVID, I think we are staring at a big problem.
Yeah. I just want to, of course, we're not going to steer the conversation talking about, overwhelming evidence directs us to understand that there's a big problem with girls and women being, harassed online and everything. But you definitely have a point, Charles, and I want to quickly throw this question to you, Sharon and William. What happens, and absolutely, because boys, first of all, from my perspective, men and boys are part of this conversation, because you need to include them in order to educate and make them understand the dangers and the terrible, the negative impact of online harassment when it's directed at women, especially when it comes from men, but also in the event that men are harassed or boys are harassed. How, from a perspective of Plan International, how is that a conversation that, just very briefly, that you...
If at all it's a conversation.
Yes, that you address.
No, it is a conversation, and I will say it is a conversation, because online abuse and harassment is online abuse and harassment. But what we see is that the numbers, if we do our research, the numbers of girls and young women that have been disproportionately affected, yes, is actually the skew is just so significant. So yes, there are men who have, boys who have suffered the same torrent of abuse that we're talking about, and it has devastating effects. But more and more, through numbers and the researches that we have done, we've seen that for girls, it's really alarming. Alarming in the sense that every year, Plan International globally, we produce what is called the State of the World's Girls Report. Mm-hmm. So the most recent report, we talked to 14,000 girls across the world. And here's the interesting thing. 52% of them said at one point in time, they have either suffered harassment, or bullying, or discrimination, or something bad online. 52%, now that's significant. That's 7,000 plus. Of that 52%, 41% said at some point they contemplated leaving that platform because it was just too much for them. And it has affected their confidence and their self-esteem. So basically they've been silenced, right? So we see that, yes, it's an issue. And I think when we work together with multiple actors and stakeholders, we just need to come to a place where we have an effective mechanism in cyberspace where we try to get a good semblance of behavior and how we treat each other. But then the numbers that are stacked up against the girls and young women are alarming, to say the least. And we are coming where we already have these existing, harmful gender stereotypes that are also persisting. And we think that this is just a multiplier effect on things that have already been bad. So I think there is obviously a conversation. And I think one of the strategies we have seen as Plan International that is sustainable in this gender equality drive is the male engagement, to engage men, to actually be the ambassadors for the girls. Because if girls speak about their issues alone, then it can be classified as just a girl's issue. However, when we engage men and boys so that they can practice what we call positive masculinity, it actually helps in the whole conversation. So definitely I agree there is space for that, but we want the male or the boy ambassadors to actually be working together with the girls and to deal with these issues.
Yes, Charles, very quickly before we go to Sharon.
Yeah, I just wanted, at the risk of ensuring that I'm not misunderstood, it is very easy for a man or a boy to enjoy harassment. The reverse is not true. It is very easy for a boy or a man to brag about being harassed by a woman. The reverse is not true. So I think it is extremely important that we get it that we get it like that. That said, however, I think there are levels in which this whole emancipation drive is making women more bold. And that's precisely the point that I want to raise, that today, and I think the last time we had this discussion was with Plan Rwanda on the show here, the fact that a very good section of highly emancipated women will take it offensive when you buy them a drink in a public place.
Without their permission.
Yes.
That's it. It's all about consent.
Yes, exactly my point.
It's all about consent. If you just plonk a drink in front of me, I'll be offended. But if you ask for my consent, then why not?
And then when I buy it without your consent, one of your cousins or sisters will go on social media and make a whole hula baloo about mean Rwandan men who do not buy.
Wow, Charles. We're coming back to that, but knowing you and your humor, I'm sure you could not resist that. So, Sharon, just very quickly before we go to the next part of the conversation, do you want to weigh in on the conversation that also needs to be had about involving men, or also when people ask, but what about boys, but what about girls? What's your take on that?
Yes, indeed, I think boys being weighed in or men being weighed in into the conversation is very vital, because when we look at gender-based violence, it is not being perpetrated by just one sex. It is either by the boys or by the men, and either by the women or the girls. So therefore, what we would like to put in front is that boys come in and men come in as allies to the cause. They understand that they are the perpetrators or they are being perpetrated on. So we stand together as a force and work towards ending gender-based violence online.
Thank you. Now, what's Plan International doing about it? We've talked about definitions, we've talked about understanding GBV, Charles has weighed in on some very interesting social perspectives. But really, what not only is Plan doing about it, but I'd also like to hear your perspective on what companies, social media companies or governments can be doing to enable this space to be conducive for girls and women and boys and men online.
Thank you. So Plan International, we have our flagship campaign, Girls Get Equal. So what we are trying to do with Girls Get Equal is a youth-led social movement on the issues of girls and their rights. So this movement is not a Plan International movement, and I'm now repeating myself from the last program, but it's about the girls themselves developing the agency to lead their own causes. So it has 3 pillars, power, representation, and freedom. But particularly when we look at the theme this year on freedom online, we are looking at the whole freedom piece. And what we are saying there is, girls should have the freedom to be who they want to be online, without the fear of harassment, without name calling, without shaming, without anything. Because it is important for them to be able to enjoy their rights just like anyone else, to assume an identity online and say, these are my opinions and this is what I want to do. So we want to develop, working together with the girls, policy makers, policy enforcers, the stakeholders, the communities. We want to work together so that girls, initially, we have to get the message out there and say, look, we have a problem, right, of this online gender-based violence, and we agree we have a problem. Now, it is important for us to develop the facts to support it so that we're not generalizing. So it's important for us to report on the numbers, on what's happening. Then we open the conversation on, right, so how do we deal with this? So we bring the issue on the table. But one of our pillars around Girls Get Equal is around power. And when I say power, it does not mean girls are forcibly taking power. But what we are saying is, if we're discussing online gender-based violence, we cannot discuss it without the girls being there themselves. Let's hear it from the girls about their issues. I have no right to speak on behalf of girls. Plan International Rwanda does not have the right to speak on behalf of girls, because we know girls can speak about their issues. So let them sit down and talk about their issues and what needs to be done. So I think when we tie it in with our campaign, so our campaign is then to say, these 3 pillars are going to be important, because when we say representation, we want to remove the negative stereotypes around girls and young women, particularly online. So girls and young women are not easy targets, right, for abuse. They are not easy targets for all manner of abuse. But actually, we need to represent them as a strong force that are acting according to their own rights. So this is what our campaign is basically doing. And every year, depending on the theme, we kind of customize the messages depending on what we want to do. But freedom online has emerged as a key issue. So I was actually happy that I think it was on the 20th of November, the 14th commemoration of the National Day of the Child here in Rwanda, in Parliament. This was another issue that came across to say, parents and caregivers, we have a responsibility to protect children online, because it is emerging as a serious issue. So I think there's an integration there in terms of our campaign and what we look for. So we want to develop the agency of girls so that we support them to bring these issues to the right levels, so that the policy makers, the policy enforcers actually are aware of the issues, and we try to address the issues in a holistic approach. So that's what I can say about our campaign. Yeah.
And Sharon, if you can also shed more light from your perspective as a safeguarding coordinator, what are some of the, not what you're planning to do, what Plan International has in the pipeline when it comes to online gender-based violence and, freedom online for the Girls Get Equal campaign, but what are if you can share some tangible results as to how the work that you're doing has changed some of the lives of these girls, especially when it comes to online gender-based violence?
Thank you so much. Some of the tangible results, I can give an example of the girls' takeover that happened recently. A young lady called Emma who took over Sandrine Sheja at Kisses FM. These are some of the main issues she raised on the talk show, talking about online abuse and sharing her experience, reaching out to young girls and explaining to them that they need to open their eyes to what is happening on ground. This is a young lady from Gatsibo district, and this for me, it came as a surprise, because I expected that this happens mostly in the urban area, but actually even in the rural areas. So that is something we desire to put across board, that even the young girl who is in the rural area needs to open her eyes and understand that online gender-based violence is real, and therefore she should be aware. Another thing we are doing at grassroots level is raising awareness. once again, opening the eyes of parents that they should know, they should be aware what is happening in their children's lives. When you give your child a tablet or when you give your child your phone, do you actually monitor what that child is looking at? The child might be watching cartoons on YouTube, but we know that YouTube sometimes has ads that pass by, and these may not be good content. They may be adult content. They may be content that is pornographic, that is not good for this child. And therefore, we are doing awareness right at the grassroots level, encouraging parents to follow up, look at what your child is looking at. What are they feeding their minds? Because once they feed their minds on things like pornography, they'll go back home and start practicing what they have seen.
Of course.
Yes.
I just want us to read some of our tweets very quickly that have been coming in based on the conversation that we've been having, William and Sharon. And we have our first tweet that's coming in from Esther. And Esther, if you can have that on our screens, please, asks that, are there any laws in regard of online gender-based violence? If not, they should be put in place because online gender-based violence is being normalized, which is wrong. Before we go to her next tweet, William, would you like to weigh in on that?
So I think the laws are at different levels. So countries, I know here in Rwanda, there's a draft cybersecurity law that is being crafted. And it would be important for us to be around the table as civil society actors and the girls and all the stakeholders to talk about the law and how we can bring to account the perpetrators of gender-based violence online, because it is often a gray area in terms of law on what are the reporting mechanisms. So we need to know this is the reporting mechanism, and when reports are done, who is acting on them and what are the consequences. It has to be clear. Then internationally, we also have these tech companies also coming together, because this has become even a global debate. And I'm happy that to report that Plan International came up with a petition, an online petition that we sent to Facebook, Twitter, TikTok and Instagram, and said, look, on your platforms we have serious issues of online abuse. So Instagram is the first that has responded and said, we have heard you. We are prepared to engage to see how we can make the platform more friendly. So I think those are some of the steps, but there is a Safe Spaces Act that has been agreed by all these tech platforms, but you know, international law takes time for it to then be domesticated and apply locally. But I think it's good that the movement is there, but we need to ensure that all these laws that are coming into play then deal with the complexities of cyberspace. Like we said, these are anonymous people sometimes. How do we manage identities and all that? So it's good that it's in the pipeline, and also Rwanda is following the global trend to have some cybersecurity laws so that we can have a safe cyberspace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also know about, recently, when I see recently, slightly over a year ago, the nationally launched National Cybersecurity Agency. Mm-hmm. There's also the Rwanda Information Society Authority. There's the Ministry of ICT. And so in terms of cyberspace, I think we're a country that's forward-looking in terms of how can we best protect our citizens. And I really think this whole online GBV is something that is going to be factored in. Charles, do you want to weigh in quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as easy as William makes it sound, because even if you have regulation and there's somebody out there, for argument's sake, one of our socialites who's twerking for the last 24 hours and I want to drop a comment, I'll easily open an account and I'll call myself William Chichoncho, son of Charles Mchisi. And to get to know who I will actually be will take you a lifetime. And after I have damaged that person, I will close my account and you'll never get to know what happened. So it's a tough one. But I want to really throw a comment around what Sharon said around the role of society and the role of parenting and community role around this social media abuse and online abuse. And it takes, COVID was a rude awakening to some of us. I had made a pledge to myself that my kids would never get their own gadgets until they were a certain age. Fast forward, COVID comes in and we have to do online studies, and then they have computers and what have you. Now, today they have apps that I don't have any control over on how they download. The best I can do is after they have downloaded their apps is when I can actually come to say, this is not good, this is not right. But they can chat with their friends. My parenting is not the way my neighbor parents or my other peers parent. So you have limitations in which you can get this done. And I think let's not be stupid enough to think that it's going to be a walk in the park in terms of how we address these issues. There's communal responsibility, yes, but there's also individual responsibility, and this comes up especially to girls and women who are of age. That the same way you're going to go up to report or to communicate or to go to Isanya One Stop or to tag so and so about what's happening to you, is the same way we should be able to stand up. I think there's a lot more that the likes of Plan International can do to educate the girl child. You know, the story that Sharon gives us about the girl in Gatsibo, the education that you can give me today, because of the education that has gone through, you just can't look at a woman or a young girl and be disrespectful to her. You'll think twice about it.
And the opposite also applies.
And yes. So I think now the same amount of effort needs to be put in. That the moment you harass me on my phone, on my Instagram handle, my Twitter, whatever, is the same way I should be able to really tell you, this is not appropriate. It's a very long journey. But we have to be extremely deliberate about it.
Sharon, I want you to weigh in on what Charles said, but also to just briefly answer this question, and this is to the entire panel. You know, before we put together this show, I was thinking to myself, is this a conversation really that's a priority worth having, you know, in certain countries, in certain developing countries, whereby there's, whether it's, you know, stereotype, but also more or less largely also dependent on the numbers in terms of internet penetration, in terms of access to, you know, online platforms. Is it really a big priority for countries like ours, countries like Rwanda, to be having at the moment? So very quickly, Sharon, is this conversation worth having, online gender-based violence? Is it, do we have more priorities based on what I just said? And if you also want to answer very quickly to what Charles just shared right now.
Yes. I believe this is a big priority that we need to take into consideration. I believe as African countries, we should stop the habit of being firefighters. Rather, we should take the horns straight by the horns, and then begin to do something before the problem escalates into something that we cannot be able to contain. So I believe that gender-based violence, which is being perpetrated online, is a big priority. It is something that we need to, one, understand. We need research on this to know how far, the extent that it has gone, one, in the country, right from the grassroots, and even in the urban areas. And then two, we need to understand the effects, the actual effects on the girls and on the boys. And then from there, we can begin now to take up procedures and say, now we are going to do A, B, C, D together, not only as ourselves, as Plan International, or as the government, but various partners, various players. We all take it on and say that we are going to stand together and see how this can be combated within time. Not saying that we are going to wait for the problem to escalate and then now we will begin to fight it. No, that is not right.
I really like what you said, Sharon, about being proactive, not, putting out fires. We should not wait until the fire starts. So I totally agree with you on that. And I thought that was a lovely answer to the question, is this really a conversation worth having? Across sub-Saharan Africa or countries, where they say the internet penetration is low, why are they talking about online GBV? Yes, Charles, before William also raising on that.
I want to talk this, just throw one comment that came into my mind when Sharon just said that and link it to your online internet penetration. And I just realized you actually don't need internet to harass a young girl. In this day and age of mobile money, I'll first send you 50,000 francs. And then you'll get naturally intimidated. Because I don't have the equal opportunity of meeting you physically to give you 50,000 francs. So I will send it to you by mobile money. And then we are not discussing at the same wavelength. Maybe even you've never held 50,000 francs in your hands, right? Then from that onset, back to her Gatsibo example, you're already in an inferior position. So what happens beyond that? You're already on the defensive. So I think it's one of the things that, and I got this from what Sharon said around playing catch up. We should not be playing catch up. We should know that there people are more exposed, even where there is no internet penetration at all. There's no fiber. There's no fiber. There's no routers. There's anything, but people just have a cartouche. They can harass you and.
Yeah. It's the mindset, and then maybe this is just technology that enables a bad mindset to, to thrive. William?
So I would actually want to say, even though our penetration rates are still low, but the fact of the matter is when we look at Rwanda, when we look at the rest of Africa, we are catching up in terms of the penetration. So we have new people entering the online platforms every day. So it's important for us to ensure that as they enter, they're not also going to be victims first, then we react. So as they enter those platforms, they're armed with information, knowledge, and the ability to navigate and know the risks, the downsides, and how they can mitigate, so that at least we start to have a new generation of users on online platforms that feel protected and they're empowered and they have the knowledge and they know that there's a reporting mechanism. If this happens, if someone gets my number and calls me and I don't like it, there's a reporting mechanism that is there, and someone actually listens. Because the reporting alone is not enough. Someone has to listen to the report. Someone has to act on the report. So if we get into the system of listening and acting on it, it will change the social behavior around those issues. And I think for us, and I really like the point around Charles where he said it's everyone's responsibility to come. So what we feel is that changing social norms, the day-to-day norms that make it acceptable and okay for me to harass someone or to say that comment, is the most important thing. We can come in place mechanisms of reporting, regulating, sharing knowledge and information. But once we change the social norms in our communities around how we behave and treat each other, that's going to be the most important thing. So we feel as Plan International, the long-term strategy is to change those social norms. And these are the small steps through these campaigns and through these programs that we are taking to change that whole mindset. Because that change of mindset and everyone coming together and saying, look, this is a shared issue and we are going to actually go in it together is going to be the best solution.
Absolutely. I want to just quickly read the next tweet. We have a tweet coming in from Gender, if you can have this on the screens, please. Gender in the labor market, Rwanda, who state that teenagers must be well explained about the use of social media. They don't have to accept all kinds of friend requests. Our next tweet is from Liban Mugabo, and of course this person was echoing Sharon, what she was saying about children and online safety. And Liban says, many organizations have no incentive to eliminate gender-based violence. It is the bread and butter, hence perpetuated for funding purposes. It is like asking aid organizations to end aid. They are the problem. If resources poured to fight GBV actually went to GBV, there would be none. What do you want to say to that very quickly? It looks like a subtweet. I hope Liban was not referring to plan. I mean, that would be unfortunate.
But just before William, yes. I want to comment on the previous tweet.
On teenagers.
Yes, and there is. I think during the course of the week, yesterday or the day before yesterday, that one around friend requests. And so I want to make two particular comments about that.
I'll ask you to be quick, Charles.
Yes, I'll be extremely swift.
Yes.
So one is, the handle, back to my earlier point, gender in the labor market, Rwanda. And then just look at that.
It looks like a robot or
Thank you.
Not a real person.
To my earlier point, exactly. But more importantly, Yesterday or the day before yesterday, one of Rwanda's leading socialites was bragging about the number of followers she has. And she was telling somebody who had, either offended her in her opinion, but if you need me to lend you some followers or so that your follower base grows, I'm happy to do that so that you get as close to my following as possible. So the point here is it is very easy to fall into that trap of growing a follower base of, like rubbish followers for, excuse my Spanish. Yeah. So let's not. It's very easy to say that you just want to follow to grow your follower base, but depending on your circles in which you are, sometimes quantity is more important than the quality. Yeah.
Or quality is more important than the quantity.
Depending.
Depending. Yes. William, that very quick comment to what seemed like a subtweet is what we call such tweets. Was he alluding to organizations such as yours? What do you have to quickly say to that?
So I can assure the person who has just sent that tweet that Plan International Rwanda is a different flavor, and is so many other civil society organizations in Rwanda. Because here in Rwanda, as a civil society organization, we just don't set up shop and start operating. We have to sit down, talk to government, we have action plans, we've got MOUs, we've got annual plans, we submit to the Rwanda Governance Board, we work with districts, they have their imihigo, and we also have to plug in so that the transformative agenda of Rwanda is reflected through our work. So I can assure you that at all those levels, those people will not allow us to sell air pies, literally. So we are making solid investments, and through the gender machinery, especially the gender monitoring office, through the statistics that they've been able to extract, we see progress in Rwanda, real progress. We are not yet there, but we are seeing real progress through these investments. So I can assure them that on the GBV front, we are really working well together. And the recently launched campaign, launched by the First Lady around child defilement, is another example where multiple stakeholders have come together and said, this is an issue in Rwanda that we need to deal with. And Plan International is also a key actor in that. So we have all stakeholders sitting around the table addressing the issue.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And I know we had a conversation with the NINGO, for International Network of National International NGOs and non-governmental organizations. The chair of NINGO was here, and we had the same thing because there are people who kind of look at NGOs and think, but you can't just come and set up shop, especially in the civil society world, international civil society world in Rwanda. There's a complete series of co-creation, co-working, and consultancy, and having targets, aligned. I think we also have just a few minutes left, and I want to go to Sharon. You've been rather quiet. I think we left you alone for a couple of minutes. And Sharon, it is just as we come to the end of the show, if you can give your closing remarks, not only on the Girls Get Equal campaign, Freedom Online, but also your expectations as someone who works at the grassroots level, for Plan International, but you work with other Rwandan local organizations as well as government. What are your expectations in the future in terms of online gender-based violence affecting, in the a large section, girls and women?
All right. One of my main expectations is that I hope to see parents more involved in the lives of their children. Like Charles said, it is a communal understanding. So when parents come in and get more involved in what their children are accessing online, I believe this is one of the major things that parents can do to ensure that their children are protected. Another thing I expect is more awareness will be raised right from grassroots level to the urban level, to the national level, whereby not only the parents are aware of some of these problems online, but also the children are aware. And they know that when this and this is done to me, that is a form of harassment, that is a form of abuse online, and therefore they know. Another thing is I'm expecting to see the reporting mechanisms are are appropriate and are known right from the grassroots level, whereby a child knows that when I have a problem, I can call the National Police Helpline, Child Helpline 116, and then I will get a solution to my problem. I believe these are some of the expectations.
Thank you very much, Sharon. We've come to the end of the show. William, I think your closing remarks in just describing how the plan works in the civil society sector with government, I think sets a good, closing to the conversation we've had, because we are running out of time. Charles, always a pleasure to have you on the show. I'd like to thank you, William. Also a pleasure to have you. Sharon Chichoncho, great to have you on the show. Keep the conversation going. We can still see your tweets and posts coming in using #TheSquareRW. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bourbon Coffee, always supporting the Square, as well as Uzi Collections. Have a very good night. Thank you for tuning in, and see you again next week. Good night.